My name is Marina Kladova, and today we're going to talk about motivation of adult learners. I'm very sorry for my voice, but I unexpectedly got ill, so you have to just bear my hoarse voice. So I have been working with adults for about, I guess, 10 years, and currently I have only one student whom I teach online and one student who I teach offline. Now I'm the Chief Methodology Officer of Skying. Maybe you know, so this is one of the largest online schools in Russia, and I'm responsible for materials writing and teachers development in that school. So we are going to speak about motivation of adult learners. I do not want to speak about very banal things, about types of motivation and that kind of stuff, but I want to start my presentation with reminding you that no matter how self-motivated your learner is, you should always remember about their motivation, and you should always scaffold your learners and help them with their motivation. You have to encourage them. So very often I ask myself, like, okay, I can read the text, I can highlight the words, I can listen to something a number of times, and then once my teacher trainer told me, are you sure that your learners are as able to do the same as you can? I say, no, I'm not sure. And I realized that 95% of our learners cannot continue learning English for a long time. That's why I researched a lot and experimented a lot in my classroom with different motivation tricks. And today I'm gonna share them. The very first thing I want to start with is about their energy level. Maybe this is not really related to ELT, but if you're aware of this, it will help you a lot to keep your students motivated. What I had in my classroom was that my learners actually came either early in the morning or late in the evening. They were really tired, they didn't have enough sleep, they had too much work, they had too much stress, and I tried to push them. I prepared a lot of activities and I just pushed them to be in a good mood. I pushed them to do the activities, and then they say, sorry, I just can't. And then when I saw this matrix, unfortunately I do not remember where I saw it, but the idea is pretty simple, and this is what I've been using in my classroom for a while. Actually, it shows you that, so you look at your learner and you understand whether he has like low energy or high energy, whether he's in a good mood or he has good emotions or bad emotions. And depending on what, so I don't know. Oh yeah, depending on what square he is, I adapt my activities to the learner. For example, if my learners come in the evening very tired, I just say, okay, I wouldn't start with present perfect or whatever. I'd rather have maybe 5-10 minutes talk about how the week was, or I would show them maybe some funny pictures. We would discuss something not really work related, but something which can improve their mood. So I basically I either go to work on their emotions, so I would bring some positive emotions in the classroom, or I would do something energetic. Maybe just I would ask them to walk around the classroom and maybe, I don't know, mingle and communicate with other learners. So I basically would go I'm sorry, I have mixed actually. So the emotions, I guess, are here, and then I would go from burnout to renewal when they have re-energized after some of the activity. So the word stirrers and settlers. So these are types of activities which you use if you want to energize them. You would use some activities which allow them to move and to increase their energy level. For example, to mingle around the class, maybe to change the places and, I don't know, walk around finding for something which is hidden in the class, Or when they are too energized, I would ask them to do something calmer, just to settle them down. For example, I may ask them to write their thoughts or to write their ideas on the paper, or to listen to something when they do not have to interact with each other, but when they do something on their own and gradually calm down. The other thing, as I have mentioned previously, was to improve their emotions, and I often use different kinds of TV shows or just some funny pictures. Every lesson I usually have a couple of pictures or a couple of videos at hand before the lesson, and when my students come and I see that, oh, the student is not in the mood, before starting my lesson I'd rather show him some picture, sharing my story, like, oh look, this is something which I have found recently, what do you think about this? And we could have a common laugh together, or we could just discuss something. Sometimes, if I do not have anything at hand, I might ask my learner if he has got something. What I have learned during my practice is that I know everything about my learner. I know when my learner is in a good mood, when he's in a bad mood. For example, I've got my learner Kirill, my student Kirill, so he's 35, and for example, when he's in a bad mood, when I ask him, how are you? Normal. And this is enough for me to say, okay, normal, let's just make something just to make it just higher than normal. The next tip, which also seems pretty obvious, is personalizing your lessons. But it's easier said than done, especially in groups. Because if you have an individual learner, you always know about your learner's interests, about your learner's goals, but it's more difficult to adjust this approach to the group. What I do as a teacher when I have group lessons, mostly they're B2B lessons, I mean like corporate clients, but anyway, we have got the group of 4 or 8 students, and I create the environment where everybody is, where everybody can share his opinion, where everybody can bring his own voice to the classroom. We have got a set of the rules which says do not criticize. So they could express their opinion, but they cannot criticize. Once they criticize somebody, I just stop it. I mean, just literally I say, I'm sorry, this is not pro, or just I have the card, actually the red card. And then also, if I have the red card, it means so they are not expressing their opinion, but they are addressing, I mean, they are attacking somebody's opinion, so which is wrong. And it actually helps, and my learners are not afraid of expressing their own opinions. They also, at first, they expressed, and they were quite, not aggressive, but they expressed only their opinion, and they didn't, they were not really interested in what other people were thinking about. But gradually, so when other people express different opinions, we learned a lot how to ask follow-up questions, which helped, and we learned how to build the dialogue and to show the interest. And actually what once started as sharing the opinion turns gradually into small dialogues when 2 people exchange their ideas. One more idea which I have in my classroom is I ask them to bring their materials, pictures and stories to the class. For example, I know that the next lesson we are going to speak about the songs. What I do is I ask my learners to bring their favorite song, or to bring their favorite book, or maybe just to bring their favorite story. And we start the lesson not with a typical warming-up, but we start the lesson when they exchange their books, their songs, they listen to each other, they ask each other questions about each other's favorite, and it helps a lot. I'm gonna, okay, maybe just, what I do with my B2B clients is I ask them to find an article at home, to highlight some words, and for the next lesson I ask them to teach each other 3-4 phrases from the article and to give a short idea what the article was about. At the beginning, it was quite a challenging task because I had only 2 learners out of 6 who actually did this. But I decided to continue the experiment, and I put them into groups where like 3 groups, 1 person was speaking and 2 were listening. And again, gradually, so after a couple of times, 3 people brought their articles, 4 people brought their articles, and now everybody, so we do it once a week, and now every Monday everybody brings their articles, so they bring their own voice, they show what their interests are, and at the same time they teach each other just some words which could be interesting for them, because they are more or less in the same environment, in the same company, and actually it it helps me a lot to save my time. And maybe the last thing which I want to mention here about personalizing the lesson is that you should always keep in mind what your learner's goals are. These are very, I would say, widespread, like using live, pass exams, traveling. But what I mean here is that equip your learners with the necessary language for them. You know their interests, you know their weak points, you know their goals. So give the language which is interesting for them. Give the resources which are interesting for them. For example, you know that your learner is a big fan of, for example, Nautchpok, which he watches in Russian. What I do for my learners is I help him to come with similar websites but in English, and I try to implement and promote the idea of English as a lifestyle as much as possible. So basically they give me something in Russian, what they read, what they do, and we try to find some analogies in English so that they could dive into English and they could have more language exposure. The third point which I want to make is allow them to make choices. Who gives choices to your learners, and if so, how do you do that? Okay, Yelena Kuznetsova. Do you give choices to your learners, and how?
Well, sometimes I prepare different tasks on a similar topic, and I tell them, well, okay, you can choose whatever you like most of all, with pictures or with more pictures, more words, or something like this.
Okay, good. So you actually give them a choice in tasks.
Right.
Right. Okay, but in tasks you mean by giving different types of tasks or different visual layout?
Well, they are on the same topic, right? And they are on the same target vocabulary. But they look different, and the mechanics is different, so they can choose whatever they like.
Okay, good. I saw also one person.
Actually, the same maybe story. Sometimes it's just different types.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you like to listen to a song or to watch a cartoon?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just so when we are watching the picture, they can choose a picture. They like to express their opinions.
Right. Okay. Good. What I do is I actually do a couple of things. So the first thing I do is connect it to their homework, especially in groups. I give them differentiated homework. What I mean by this, it's not exactly what you mean by different types of tasks, but the first idea is that I always give something which is compulsory. It's normally for 10-15 minutes. Because what is eatable? I mean, what is doable? Because sometimes they are too busy, too tired, too stressed, and I do not want to stress them out. But here I give something very basic, but it's usually a video or a reading with some task, and then I give more tasks like which is related to this. I recommend them what else they could do to improve their performance, which means it's also like for kind of 15 minutes, and then I give something optional. Sometimes I give this myself, or sometimes, if it is Monday, some of my learners prepare by optional. They have got any article or any video which they want to watch or they want to work with. And then every Monday they come, they bring their stories to the classroom, we discuss them, share our opinions, and actually it shows my learners that I care about what they learn English for, and they get to know each other better, they get to know English better because they work with the language which is relevant to them, which is relevant to their interests and their goals. The next point, which is very close, maybe what you ladies have said. This is the idea taken from Lizzie Pinard, who is the expert in learner autonomy, and she suggests her learners to experiment with the language. What she does actually is she suggests them a list for each skill, and then her learners actually have kind of a diary when they write when they listen to something, and then they write their comments. Actually, it works like every learner, they do it once per 2 weeks, I guess. So every 2 weeks, a learner chooses something from listening part, for example, this piece, and then he writes when he does it, so that a teacher also could see what her learners have done, and then she could read her comments. They also discuss the stories in the classroom once per 2 weeks, as I do with my learners. I think this tool is really nice, especially if you want to develop your learners' autonomy, and if you want your learners to be able to live with English, not just to use it in the class to speak about present perfect or past continuous, but rather listen and watch, or I don't know, read what they would naturally do in their life, in their first language. You just help them to come up with some ideas, and you help them with the place where they can start. I would say that I really scaffold a lot my learners at the beginning when I promote the idea of learner autonomy, but the more they do something, the less control I have, and my learners could choose whatever they like. They just put it in their diaries, which I will show you later, and I'm just familiar with what they have done. Then at the beginning of each course, actually, I give them the choice what content and topic to choose. Sorry, was just an example. This is an example of Keynote, I guess upper intermediate. So every lesson starts, not every lesson, but every course starts with the questions like, which topics do they like? Which topics they don't like, and if there are some topics which they don't like, I usually ask, okay, instead of this topic, what would you like to discuss, which is relevant? If it is, for example, if it is the technology, but they are not really into the technology, what aspect of technology, or maybe what is very close to technology, and what else could we discuss? And then we move, for example, from technologies, I don't know, maybe to trends in the world, which is a very wider topic, but technology is the part of this. And, so I also ask them, what topics are interesting for them? No, actually, I want to, okay, they don't like, interesting for them. This is not what is in the book, but this is something else which they want to discuss. And I usually collect these ideas, and when we have got, for example, after 2 units, I add one topic which is interesting for them, but which is not in the syllabus. And we discuss, and they really have fun, because this is about them. And the last thing where I allow them to make choices is to choose the words. If you look here, this is something which looks like a traffic light, but actually, so this is a word list for a lesson which we have. But the problem which I had is, it's always been, that different learners have got different background, which means one learner may know the word, for example, environment, the other may not. What I do is I ask my learners in Google Docs, like we have got Google Docs, and I have got the sets of the vocabulary, and they color them in red, green, and yellow. Green are the words which they know. This shows me what they know, or what all the class knows. Red are the words which they do not know, and yellow are the words which they have in their passive vocabulary. When I look at all of this list, it gives me the idea what kind of vocabulary I should teach and focus in the class, and what kind of vocabulary I can skip. So it reduces my time in the classroom when I work with the vocabulary, because I will not focus on the words which are green. I will focus on the words which are red and which are yellow. I also ask them, apart from this word list, I ask my learners to, this is the application A-Word, maybe you know this. So I ask them to create their own personal vocabulary, personal word list. And then they take these words, for example, from the articles, and then they can teach their peers or they can share their words, their stories with these words. This personalized vocabulary is an interesting technique because it really increases their motivation, because when they see the words like environment, the words which they know, they say, I'm sorry, why do I need to learn them? I do already know them. Can I just learn something more? And the list could also vary in size, because some learners may learn 5 words, others may learn 20 words, but I usually limit their word list by 20, because, I don't know, so there are techniques which allow you to learn 100 words, but so I limit it by 20, and I say, it's better to know these 20 words but very well than 100 words but receptively and just without any real practical usage. The next one is also seems very, very obvious, but I want to focus on that. So it's about preparing learners for real life. I would say that here the idea is that you should always know why your learners learn English, because when you know that your learner, for example, want to pass an exam, your program would cater to that particular need. When you know that your learners want just to have fun or learn English for themselves, or they want English to watch films or read magazines, you would approach your teaching differently. What I do with my learners is I always give them authentic tasks which are related to their goals. I give them the choice, usually so they are skill-based, speaking, writing, reading and listening. Sometimes I prepare it myself, but when I have groups, I could ask my learners to create 1 or 2 tasks for their peers. What we actually do is I ask them to call, for example, a real bank, to write a real email to a real online shop, or to choose an article which is work-related. And we see how it all goes, and we find the places, the bottlenecks, which stops my learners to do the task. For example, I had the task with this is the task for my student Andrew, who is upper intermediate, but his writing is pre-intermediate really, and his speaking is like pre-intermediate as well, but he's really good at reading, and his listening is okay. And when he tried to call the bank, he just couldn't understand, because he is used to the British accent, and when I asked him just to listen to an American accent, he said, no, I can't understand a thing. And then when I saw this, I catered my programs and included more American accents in our listenings, and we focus on connected speech and all these phonetic all these phonetical features of the speech. And you know, so in a month he actually managed to do these tasks much better, because he was given the strategies and he was shown his weak points, and what he couldn't perform a month earlier was really doable in a month once we have focused on the right things. And I think a very important thing, but which everybody knows and maybe does in the classroom, is giving authentic materials. You may there are tons of authentic materials. Again, what I do with my learners is I choose very relevant materials to my learners. So if his interests are, I don't know, technologies, artificial intelligence, and I don't know, programming, I would definitely choose something like listening of top scientists in these fields. I don't know, we would watch some films like Black Mirror or Westworld, which are very, very techy. And when we work with authentic materials, what I do in my lesson is I help them to overcome possible difficulties. I work on the strategies, how they can become better listeners, how they can become better readers, how they can become better speakers. Tip number 5, I share my story as a language learner. So I'm the model of the language for my learners. And when they ask me, I want to speak like you, I say, why? Like, I'm an English teacher, why do you need to speak like me? Like, you may speak with your own accent, you may speak with mistakes, or unless it impedes the general understanding. Well, and they ask me how I overcome, like, the challenges, if I had any. And then I start telling my stories, not all, but one at a time. Like Scheherazade, I don't know. And I show them the techniques which could really help somebody to learn a language. I speak about shadowing. This is when you listen to something and repeat after the speaker. I speak about how I work with extensive reading, how I highlight the words, which words I highlight, what I do with it later, what do I do if I don't know the word. One of my favorite techniques, which I would say like 80% of my learners do, is reading aloud. So they basically take any book or any grammar exercise that they have and they just read it aloud. And because they read it aloud, your brain thinks that you actually speak, but you speak a ready text. At the same time, your mouth and other speech organs work. That's why you also practice a bit of fluency, a bit of developing your speech organs. And in some time, usually after 2-3 weeks, my learners see the results and they start speaking more fluently, they start to speak more confidently, they start to speak more accurately, because they read and they learn these language chunks, which they encounter a couple of times and then they could use them in speech. Yeah, so I share the strategies which I have. And my learners appreciate it a lot because they see an example that speak like a native speaker, even it's just quite a taboo right now, is achievable. So we studied at the same time, at the same place, but we did it in different ways. And I also share my favorite resources or my favorite books. This is very personal, but if I know that, for example, my learners also like detective stories or technologies, or they really like songs, what I would do is I would share, I have read a book by James Peterson, this is a really fascinating story, or just a nice book by Dan Brown. So I would give the review, and then they would just go, maybe we could take a piece from that book or from that film, discuss something at the lesson just to hook them, and at home they would go and read and watch these films. And the last one, which is also very, very important in my opinion, is develop reflection in your language learners. By this I mean when they start to think what they learn, why they are learning this or that piece, what is difficult. Yes. So I ask them to be aware of their learners. So I ask them what is working, what is not working, so what are your achievements, so what is difficult for you, how can I help you. What we usually do is, unfortunately I don't think it's well seen, but we usually have got kind of a reflection diary. When we have got the name, so everybody has got the diary, like he has got his goals. We usually set like 2-3 goals in each skill. So this person hasn't got reading because he's really proficient in reading. And then every week he actually writes his activities down and he writes his reflection. For example, he writes his goal, what he wants to do within the week, his action during the last week, new words, and sometimes they write here questions. So when we have got questions here, they could write, I had questions about some piece, for example, about listening, or I have got a question, I don't know, so what is present perfect, or something like that. It helps me to see how my learners think, what they reflect about, and it helps me to change the program a bit. Because when I saw that he doesn't want to improve the reading, I just dropped out this aspect at all. Neither in homework nor in the classroom I do not address reading at all. but I focus a lot on speaking and listening in the classroom because this is important. I guess this is all what I wanted to tell you. Now we have got like 10 minutes to answer your questions if you have any. Yes, please. Could you please say your name and just ask a question here? I will just share my contact.
Okay, so my name is Elena, and unfortunately I have not one question.
Okay, far away.
So about the last one. So you said if and a student, so do they fill in the diary every week? Do they do it at home? And if he doesn't want to do it?
Well, actually, this is voluntary. This is what we do. I spent 5-10 minutes at the end of each week. I mean, for example, if we have lessons, for example, Monday and Thursday, on Thursday, like 10 minutes before the end of the lesson, I would give them to think about their learning and to reflect in the classroom. I do have, just in the classroom, because one person out of 10 would do it at home. So I prefer to give them, I prefer not to overload them at home. So I give some time in the classroom, and if they don't want to do it, I usually give them some task. Read an article, do some grammar exercises. No, I never give grammar exercises, but I give some extra reading or extra listening. So that everybody can.
One more question about homework.
Okay.
So you showed us abbreviated way of homework, yes?
Okay.
Just obligatory that you can choose and optional.
Yes.
And so you do such homework every time for every lesson, and there was additional information that you have showed us. So like
Yes.
and it's just a lot of work.
Yes, true. But you know, sir, it's a lot of work at the very beginning, because at the very beginning you actually have to do everything on your own. You have to write what is compulsory, what is recommended, what is optional. What happens a bit later once you have implemented this is that, so speaking about optional, they choose the articles or the videos themselves after a while. So you do not have to specify something optional. I give it here for learners who are very lazy and to go and find something. But in a month or in 2 months, the learners actually get used to and they get interested in this. So everybody starts to find something optional for themselves. Sometimes I have got recommendations from other learners. For example, we have been discussing something and then they say, well, you know, sir, I have got a really nice article. I say, nice, what's the name? Could you give us the link? And what we do is I put what my learners have contributed to the lesson, to the recommended stuff, and they do it. But frankly speaking, so especially at the beginning, so most of the stuff goes from the workbook and from some extra activities related to the book. I mean, so I just divide some homework. For example, you have got the homework for half an hour. What you do is you have to find something very essential just to address their weak points, and therefore you put in compulsory, something which is really interesting for them, but maybe not that urgent, I would say. You could put in recommended, and something which they can do well, but still, if they want some grammar, go ahead. Optional homework is for you. Sometimes they do not do all of the homework. It's fine, because I'm aware that my learners are adult learners who got their life, who got their problems, stress and aims, but still, it really helps them to get interested. When I see that my learners are too tired, they have been learning English for half a year, they say, enough. Good. We have one or 2 weeks without homework, and we do not have any homework. I have just spoken lessons, speaking lessons. They do not have any homework. And then at some point I say, you know, there is a nice article, but you do not do homework, so sorry. And then they say, no, we want homework. I say, okay, so here's an article for you to read, and then, sorry, it just goes on.
Thank you.
Yes, Elena.
Well, I assume that these things work well for high-level students. Any ideas how to
Not really.
adapt them?
No, sorry. Actually, it could work. It could work with beginners and elementaries as well. So, I mean, what kind of things are you talking about?
I mean, to choose an article. Or something.
Well, you know, so just when we speak about low-level learners, what I do is I show them different resources. For example, breaking news English, or ella.org, or just some others. Even lyrics training have got their 0 level. And what they do, like, I kinda limit the resources which they can use. But when they go to lyricstraining.com, it's up to them to choose the song. It's up to them to choose the article to read. Okay? Yes, please. Could you give your name, please? Ekaterina, okay.
Do you, sorry, so do you share this table with them on Google Docs?
Yeah, sure. So I do not have any physical journal, but all of my documents are on Google Docs. And for example, we have got the group Google Docs. So for example, if I have got a couple of, so of course, this is what we have got, one document for everybody. But for example, when we speak about,
Vocabulary list.
for example, about this kind of thing, we usually have got all the learners. I've got the directory. No, I've got the directory, and so they have got, for example, 8 tables, so that if they want, they could watch something from their peers.
And vocabulary list with this, with the colors. Is it?
Yeah. So actually, for example, we have got. Sorry, I have got 8 sheets. I mean, by the names of their learners, and they have got the same list, but they color it differently. Again, when I click through all of 8 sheets, I could say, okay, so definitely I'm not gonna teach the word business, like for example, I don't know, thought and that kind of stuff. 1 minute is left, so the last question is Lana.
Yeah. So you ask them to make this word list, to prepare this word list with color code before the lesson. You're going to practice or teach this word.
Well, actually, so what I do, frankly speaking, is I give them the word list before each unit, so that they could get the idea what we're going to talk about. So yes, they do this at home, so that they could see at the very beginning to where they start from. And then so they recycle this vocabulary as well as reviewing this vocabulary during all, 4 lessons. And then they see the progress that ideally, by the end of the unit, all the words should be green or at least yellow. Thank you very much for your time, for your attention. Yeah. Okay, thank you.